Thanks so much, Randy. And it's such a pleasure having people that I've talked to via Zoom now to see you in person. So again, thank you so much for participating in the 2021 Tesla Awards. We couldn't do this without judges who took time out of their schedules to help evaluate the submitted projects. Terry McGowan, who I'm sure most of you know, who is a director at large for the NLB, Naomi Miller from PNNL, Jim Yorgi, who's in the audience, a treasurer of an NLB and independent consultant, Ruby Jadwitt, also with the NLB, and John Paul Friesner from RPI in Albany, New York. So again, great to have these folks who took time to evaluate these projects. Let's give them a round of applause. The next project is Princeton University Firestone Library, lighting design firm Fisher Marantz Stone, with designers Enrique Garcia Carrera and Charles Stone. The design of this 10-year project, yes, a 10-year project, was to transform the library into a modern information and student gathering hub while making miles of stacks accessible and energy efficient. Concepts were developed and tested, options calculated for illuminance and energy, and samples reviewed for light quality and brightness control. The project implementation started with T5 fluorescent lamps, remember those, right? And transitioned to LEDs as the project progressed. Narrow batwing optics were applied to precisely direct light where needed. The developed system was mocked up on site before rollout. A sophisticated control system maintains low light levels in unoccupied stack aisles and smoothly ramps up upon detecting occupancy. Sensors were precisely located and tuned to avoid false triggering from adjacent traffic. The fixture control integration optimized the lighting to benefit students by reducing eye strain and maintaining safe after-hours light levels. Reading rooms and public spaces were reimagined. In the Rare Books Reading Room, formerly a courtyard, it features a combination of large pendants befitting the room scale and style, and localized task lights to ensure proper contrast and illuminance for focused studying. Congratulations, Fisher Marantz Stone, accepting the award, Enrique Garcia Carrera and Charles Stone.
Thank you very much. It can be excruciating to work on a long duration project, 10 years, especially in an era where lighting is advancing technologically on a weekly basis, and it's already outdated by year 2, let alone year 10. So I'm glad that it got recognized.
Thank you again.
I want to add that since I went to Princeton, it was difficult to say no to them when they wanted changes, so it was Enrique's job to keep me in line and the client in line. Thanks, Enrique.
Thank you.
As you think about luminaire details and performance for your ultimate solutions, why did you select what you selected? Or any tips and best practices for using mock-ups versus, computer-generated calculations and renderings?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a 10-year project, and the Firestone Library is one of the largest libraries of its kind, a university library, and great majority of the space is taken up by book stacks still in this digital age, miles and miles of books. So we did the lighting for the whole renovation of the complete library, but one of the first tasks that we took on
was to figure out how we were going to light those miles and miles of stacks, because if we solved that, we would solve 75% of the project. So the university has very ambitious sustainability goals. They have a program to become carbon neutral within a few years from now. And so the energy used for the project was very highly scrutinized. And at the same time, we were starting out with metrics, for example, from the IES, which prescribed at the time, 10 years ago, a vertical luminous value of 30-foot candles, 30 inches above the floor for stack lighting. And it's very tough to achieve while keeping a low carbon footprint. It's also technically very tough to have 30 vertical foot candles at knee height and not have 100 or 200 foot candles at the top of the stack, right? Because of the loss of cosines. So that's where not only the calculations that we did, but the testing in our lab and on site of various different models came into play, because the modeling only goes so far, and especially when you model something to calculate over a very small space, which a stack becomes a very small space, it's not as accurate as when you do it for a larger space. In our lab here in New York, and there was a lot of on-site trying out things and showing the client things that we thought would work and things that we thought would not work. One of the first things that we did is advise the client, this is what the IS recommends. We think it's too high. We want to go lower than that. Now, little did we know that not only would the client be on board with that, they would be pressuring us to go even lower and lower and lower, because their first interest was to keep very, very low wattage consumption. So in our lab, as we were testing light fixtures and measuring light levels on vertical surfaces, we came to a magic number that was 17-foot candles. So almost half of what the IES was prescribing at the time. Once we got on site and had mock-ups of one full stack aisle, the universe and we were able to control it with dimmers, the university kept wanting to go lower and lower and lower. So at the end of the day, we were probably at 1/3 of where those 30-foot candles started at. How did we try and get as much uniformity as possible? First, of course, we would look for light fixtures that had the right kind of candle power curve, which you want to have a very narrow bat wing distribution with the maximum candle power basically at the bottom of the stack, and with very little spill at the top. And there are a few manufacturers that could achieve that, but many of them did not fit either the brightness control requirements that we had, or frankly, the form factor and dimensional requirements that we and the architects were envisioning for the room. So at the end of the day, there was really just one manufacturer that fit the bill, and that was selected, and that's the fixture that was used for miles and miles, and started to get installed, in the early teens, and completed installation by 2019.
I noticed, these occupancy control systems per aisle. So that was very intriguing to me. You need light when you need it, and you want to shut it down when you don't need it, but you still want a safe and secure space. So, talk
Correct.
about a little bit about the challenges in incorporating an occupancy control system per aisle.
So one of the things that we did as part of the overall overhaul of the lighting for the university is that we incorporated a building-wide control system, an intelligent control system that allowed us to have differing dimming settings for different parts of the day and for different days of the week, the weekends and such. And one of the things that we would be able to do is have that really particular level of control of each one of the stack aisles by tying them to individual occupancy sensors is how we did it. So each aisle has two sensors, one near each end of the aisle, with very narrow focus, and it gets triggered when somebody enters the aisle. One of the tough things to do was to avoid false triggering when people are walking by on the main circulation path and not entering the stack aisle. So that also required very fastidious mocking up on site to get the exact right location where those occupancy sensors needed to be. So we have 2 of them per aisle where people can come in from both ends of the aisle. And again, all with the purpose of saving energy. It was paramount to the university. So what we did is that during normal library operation hours, those stacks remain illuminated at full output. And then after normal operation hours, the library is still open for students and for whoever has access to it and that can come and look for a book. Then the light levels in each one of the stack aisles would come down to very low light levels, just a couple of foot candles. And then as somebody would step into the aisle, those light levels would ramp up to the maximum allowed. Slowly, but fast enough so that it's useful, but slow enough that it's not jarring.
Talking a little bit more about now general lighting and some of the other spaces, but the judges particularly like the indirect lighting in the trustee room. How did you retrofit those fixtures? I mean, how did you go about that whole process?
Well, it's very funny that's one of the things that people react to the most, because that is probably the only place in the library where old technology still rules by necessity. Because when we saw these light fixtures, they're beautiful. They look like some Scandinavian pendant from the 30s and 40s, but they were actually fabricated here by Kurt Burson, which was a surprise to us because we knew Kurt Burson as downlight manufacturers. We don't know that in the past they were making beautiful decorative fixtures like this. But that fixture works as a purely indirect light source that lights up the coffer that it's mounted to and then bounces the light back into the room. And it was designed to be used with a silver bowl lamp, because you do see the bottom of the lamp, but because it's a silver bowl, there's no direct contribution into the space and it's 100% glare free. So again, taking into account that this was all happening during the first half of the 2010s, there was really no new technology light source that we could just retrofit into that fixture, because even though silver bowl LED lamps were starting to appear at the time, none of them had the light output that was required to illuminate that room. Nowhere near. It wasn't even close. Like if we wanted to use a new technology silver bowl lamp, that would mean reducing the light levels to 1/10 of what they have right now. So that wasn't going to work.
The large pendant luminaires in that rear books reading room. Talk about those. Are those custom luminaires, or are they historic ones that were refurbished?
They are neither custom nor historical. So the room that you're referring to is a very interesting room because it used to be an open space. It's really an atrium that connects 2 buildings. The original Gothic style building of the library connected to an expansion that was built in the 1980s, I believe, that has this sort of very subtle postmodernist aesthetic to it. And so this atrium, which is the rare reading book reading room, the rare book reading room is what it is, wants to sort of be the meeting point between those 2 styles. And so it was very important for us that the lighting also represented that. And again, we didn't have the budget to create a custom light fixture. So we spent a lot of time, ourselves and the architects, looking for the right aesthetic for that room. And we found it with a Spanish manufacturer who makes these very large light fixtures. I think this one's might be 8 or 9 feet in diameter, and they look a little bit old, but they'll look also a little bit modern, and those we were able to modify to take LED sources, because those were also, they were designed for compact fluorescent, I think, but we were able to modify them to take LEDs. So those are LED.
Did you use any different floor materials to enhance the reflectance of the floor to even out the light distribution? Did you go into that sort of thing?
No, we, of course, every time that we get drawn into the discussion of trying to squeeze out the most light out of the lowest power package possible, we get into the discussion about what the room materials or the room finishes really need to be, which they need to be as bright and as reflective as they will stand it. So in this case, yeah, the discussion was had, but then, you know, the architects, they go ahead and they do what they deem is best for the spaces. The room finishes in the stack areas are fairly light. The floor is fairly light. The ceiling, of course, is white. The books are what they are, and they're part of the reflectance, right?
Sure.
But in the other spaces, in some of the reading rooms, some of the lounges, some of the main lobby, which is beautiful as well. Yeah, there's a little bit more of that historical, dark, rich material selection.
Have you had any complaints about the stacks and people finding it difficult to read?
Oh, no, absolutely not. And one thing that we should make clear is that even when we were lighting below what the IES recommends for, we were still brightening those stacks beyond what they used to have there. They used to have these linear lensed fluorescent fixtures that were really putting a lot of light at the top of the stacks and virtually no light at the bottom. With this new, very precise optical performance light fixtures that we put into the project, of course, the top is not quite as bright as it used to be, and the bottom is much brighter than it used to be. So it's a lot more even, as we mentioned near the beginning of this discussion.
That sounds like a breakthrough approach to me, because candle power distributions are notoriously difficult to manage, especially with older tools like fluorescent. And so with LEDs now, it gives us a new opportunity and new optical control technologies too. So that's what caught my eye about it. I thought there was more to the story, and of course that's correct.
Well, the interesting thing about that is that we looked at what would have been equivalent versions of LED and the high efficacy T5 fluorescent lamps to create that narrow batwing distribution that we were talking about. And at the end of the day, the LED wasn't performing as well as the fluorescent. But bear in mind, this was back in 2009, 2010. So the efficacy wasn't there. The brightness control wasn't there at that time. The baffles that we were considering for shielding became much brighter with the LED solution, while the actual light levels were lower. So all those stacks ended up being illuminated with T5 fluorescent light fixtures at the end of the day, because we started at that nebulous era in the late aughts and the early teens, where it seemed that higher LED efficacy and lower cost was around the corner, was coming in, but the equipment just wasn't there. It didn't exist yet. So we have this project. We have a few other projects from that era that just missed the LED revolution. We have many LED downlights, many LED artifacts, accent lights, but the main stack lights, we couldn't make the LED work at that time.
That's
the way we wanted.
Story in itself, and also to me, it would be interesting to know how you look to combine LED and fluorescent, very different kinds of sources in many respects, especially with color characteristics the way they are. So, is there a story there that really wasn't told in what we saw?
Well, I think that the story is the same story as we see on any project where we have a combination of light sources. I guess today that would be a combination of LED chip manufacturers.
Yep.
because it happens. We never have a one manufacturer that can provide the whole array of functions that we need for a space. So we pick and choose from the best of each category. Sometimes the color doesn't quite match, right? And I think that LEDs are spoiling us a little bit to that, because in the days where we really had to mix some metal halide with some fluorescent, with some compact fluorescent, with some incandescent, the colors never matched. But we were kind of used to it. But now we expect that the colors are always going to match. And sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't really.
Well, thank you so much again for all the insight into the design of the Princeton University Firestone Library project, and congratulations again. It's a beautiful project.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. We're really honored to receive this award, especially after 10 years of toiling with this project. It's nice to get it recognized, and it's been a great success. The students love it. The faculty loves it. Now that we're in the past the worst of the pandemic, it's nice that it's getting some use again.